If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Hey, this is Jason Kleberg from the Force 5 podcast, a show that forces a guest to come up with a movie-themed top 5 list topic, and then we reveal our picks on air. Top 5 heist films, top 5 tearjerkers, top 5 movie dogs. Every show you'll be asking yourself, what would be on my list? Guests include directors, screenwriters, actors, podcasters, musicians, authors, and even a professional wrestler. Subscribe to the Force 5 podcast, and you won't just be a listener, you'll be a list nerd. The Force 5 podcast, available wherever you're listening now.
Hello, this is Aaron West. I am the author of the A24 New Wave. In this book, I look at A24's output, and I make the argument that we are in a new wave movement right now. A24 plays a major role. This book has a supplemental podcast where each episode is a brief conversation about an A24 related topic, whether an actor, director, or even a genre. As I continue research for the book and conduct interviews, I expect to record podcast episodes with people involved with the company. You can find the podcast at cinejourneys.com or wherever you find podcasts, and we are proud to be members of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Welcome to the Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller. I'm your host, Mike White. Join me, of course, is the rookie, Chris Dashew.
Can we call me that anymore, given who we have on this episode? Is that even fair anymore? Mike White, I don't even think that nom de guerre or nom de plume or nom de Philip, I don't think that works anymore, given that Max Gail is about to be gracing our podcast here in like 45 minutes.
I don't know. You're still a rookie to me, Chris.
I never won't be. I'll always be bringing you your mail, Mike, apparently.
That's right, Proby.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I just keep failing upwards.
It's the Peter principle.
Exactly.
On this very special episode of The Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller, we are talking about 3 episodes of the original Barney Miller: Old Love, Altercation, and Bones. Old Love originally aired April 2nd, 1982. I was exactly 10 years old that day. Altercation, which dropped on April 9th, 1982, and Bones, which came out April 29th, 1982. We've got Hal Linden, Alan Bergman, and Max Gail in the director's seat, and we also have Max Gail on deck, an interview about Bones, his career, all kinds of stuff. So very excited for that. But before we get into that, Chris, what did you think of these 3 episodes? 3 from the final, I should say.
I was about to say 2 things. A, this is our penultimate episode of the show, which is pretty crazy. We are now at the point where the next episode of this show is going to be the end. And it's a little, I don't know, it's a little bittersweet that we have Max Gail on this episode because, we've spent so long talking about him. And obviously we've seen several episodes that he's directed. But this is, this episode that we're going to be talking about at the end of our episode is his final episode that he directed. And so I think that these 3 episodes, I think broadly, Old Love, Altercation, and Bones, I think are pretty good. I think Old Love is interesting. I mean, again, like, anything with Dietrich is strange because Dietrich is a strange guy. And this is one of the stranger Dietrich episodes, I feel, anyways. Altercation, I think also, each of these episodes feels like it's kind of wrapping up a story here, or at least a character's kind of, not plot line so much, but at least some of their story beats from throughout the show. And Old Love, I think, does the least of the three in that regard in terms of actually pushing the ball forward. But we actually get to see that Arthur Dietrich is, quite the lover. Well, I mean, we already knew that, but
Oh, yeah. Firsthand.
huge hog leg even.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Old Love before. We watched it for the last episode, though.
We sure did,
have.
didn't we?
So it was nice to see again, and to see one of the characters we just talked about with Norman DeLuca, the Mario Recluso character. That was nice having him back, and getting accused of attacking a guy and breaking his ribs. And I guess he did break the ribs. There's no accusation there, but he was trying to perform the Heimlich maneuver. And I hear it's very common to break some ribs. Guy had no idea what was going on, thought that he was being mugged, and tries to get Recluso arrested. I think we start off the episode with that. And then we start off pretty quickly with Sharon Spellman as Cynthia Reese Barrow, who's the old flame, the old love of the title, coming back into Dietrich's life. And yeah, we get to hear more about his time when he was in college and the protests that he was a part of. And yeah, she's the one that got away. They have that real maudlin sentiment to this, but also feels like Dietrich's very, very happy to see this lady. And it's kind of a, you're talking about bittersweet, how bittersweet it is that we're coming to the end of this very bittersweet episode. And really, especially Landisberg's line about when she says, "I'll give him my best" to her husband. He's like, "You already did." Like, oh, nice.
Yeah. He, Dietrich is, I think, one of my favorite characters in the show. I mean, all the characters in the show are great. All the main characters in the show are great, but Dietrich was, he was the one that came in late. Same with Ron Carey. I mean, really, they kind of came in late to the show and had to find their groove within the groove of the four people that were on the show at the time. And, Steve Landisberg, I think he's managed to cement a spot for himself in the show, and I think this episode is a good indicator of that. I mean, again, like the fact that they can get as much mileage out of him having an old fling as they do, that's the whole point of the episode. But I mean, it's the whole point, but it's also, I mean, the episode I think is okay in its own right outside of the A plot, which isn't necessarily always the case, because we do get, I think, a pretty good B plot with the child actor who beats the shit out of his agent.
Did you recognize this gentleman?
Kind of. He's been on the show before, right?
Well, would it help if I talked about a psychic giving him a nosebleed in a restaurant?
Oh, dear God.
Yep, you're right. Modern Problems' very own. Yes. Plus, he was also in Murder Can Hurt You. So we've talked about him a few times now.
Murder Can Hurt You and Modern Problems. Boy, the two things that people are waiting, asking for, yearning for someone to talk about. Modern Problems. Oh.
Man, oh man. And when I posted the Fletch episode of the Chasing Chevy Chase podcast recently, somebody said, "Oh, I can't wait till you guys do Modern Problems." And I said, we did that a while ago. Your wish is my command. Here you go. Here's our episode. So
why would anyone wish that upon themselves willingly? Modern Problems is, oh God, it's just, yeah. Murder Can Hurt You is one thing, but Modern Problems is another. And Mitch Krendel has a very short filmography, and the fact that he has both of those on there is pretty rough.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we just did an episode about being there, and he has a almost blink and you miss it kind of appearance in there, but I love how that's the one photo that they have from stuff on IMDb.
Like, from being there, yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, all right. That's one of his best known roles. I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah, he hasn't worked in 30 years.
Yeah, maybe we should reach out, see if we can get. We got Max Gail. Maybe we can get this guy. So
Yeah, night. He'll be on Night Court eventually. So
yeah,
there's also that.
we'll be there eventually. So I'm looking forward to it. But yeah, I like that whole thing, and I like how his mother's this overbearing lady, and that is his agent, even though he beat him up, is the most sympathetic to his cause.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that I think works about the plot line in the episode is the fact that they kind of don't go the direction of what you're expecting. They go the direction of, okay, well, his agent is actually sympathetic, like, and he's not an asshole, which is weird because that's kind of the expectation when you have an old white man coming into the precinct. Is at least what it feels like to me, anyways.
Yeah, he could be another Mr. Felch, the guy with the broken ribs.
Right, exactly.
Have you seen his wooden leg?
And Mitch Crendel plays such, like, I don't know, he plays such a, I don't know how to put it other than he's just a little shit. He's like a grown-up adult little shit. Like, he just acts like such a little shit the entire episode.
It's so fitting with him being the former child star, though.
Right.
I think he did that on purpose.
Yeah, it works. I'm saying, like, it works perfectly. Him in Modern Problems is one thing, but him here, I think he's pretty great. Yeah, him and Mario Raccuzzo are pretty great. As Mario Raccuzzo plays such a, I don't know, when we talked about that Twilight Zone 85 episode or Night Gallery, whatever the fuck it was at this point, all that is just run together. I guess it was Tales from the Dark Side.
I think it's, Tales from the Dark Side, where he was cooking up what is it, Freddie Duke in the big pot? Yeah. Oh, what are all these carrots doing in here?
I think we said this last time. I'll say it again this time. Like, he is unbelievable as a villainous character. Mario Raccuzzo is.
Well, he's got those beautiful eyelashes, and he just, like, there's a couple times where they look at him and he's kind of a sad sack in this, and I'm like,
he's a dope.
Oh, yeah, he is.
It's hard for me to see him as anything other than a dope, and I think I blame Barney Miller for that, but that's fine. But yeah, he's great. I mean, everybody in this episode is great. I think, I'm not going to say we've seen this before, because I think there are some of the elements in the episode that make it feel a little different than the last couple times we've seen something like this. But I do like that we have a reoccurring character, and we have, a fair amount of people in the precinct too. I mean, I think we have 3 or 4 people.
Yeah.
4, 5 even, actually.
Yeah, because we get the child actor, his mother, his agent. We have the
Mario Raccuzzo,
the guy that he quote unquote mugged, and then even the old flame coming back. So yeah, a lot of people in the precinct, and I think they're all in there at one point. And I like the whole the way that they shot that when it's Dietrich talking with Barney, but he keeps looking over Barney's shoulder and making eye contact with his old flame. I'm like, oh, that's nice. And that was unusual because it's different camera work than I'm used to.
Well, I think they're trying to emphasize, like Arthur Dietrich and this woman, like, I don't know where it goes, because I don't think it goes anywhere. I think that's obviously the point, but
that's it.
I like the way and spot that they leave his character effectively.
Yeah, I do too. And again, he's an enigma. We have no idea really what's going on, but I love that whole little speech he gives about how he always wants to be the best at everything. And I like how he's saying that in front of his coworkers, basically like, I'm the best cop here.
I also like him apologizing about the long lunch. Sorry about the long lunch.
Oh yeah, following up on his coming in late.
Yeah.
Want to hear my excuse?
No.
My alarm clock didn't go off. Kind of anticlimactic, isn't it?
Yeah, I love Dietrich. I mean, he's, to your point, that's that speech at the end that he gives to everybody where he's like, I could have been a good doctor, I could have been a good lawyer, I could have been a good husband, but I wouldn't have been the best. But then he's I'm the best cop. Like, all right.
Sure.
Wow, what a dickhead. But like at the same time, and then he goes, present company excluded.
Right.
but like I think at the end of the day, these 4 plus, Levitt are the best of the NYPD. So I don't think he's far off. I mean, I think that's kind of the point. Barney definitely is. best of the NYPD, if not the singular best person working in the NYPD. I think that might be the case.
And he wants that promotion, man. We definitely get a little bit of that. I think it's is it in the Altercation episode?
It is in Altercation. Yeah.
So to your point, we're kind of wrapping up this whole storyline with Harris and the lawyer, the
Ripner.
shyster. Yeah, Arnold Ripner, Alex Hentelhoff himself, who
what an asshole.
He's so good at being an asshole. I love how much of a jerk this guy is. He's so good at it.
Yeah. He comes back in after Ron Harris just gets another book done in the last couple episodes.
Yeah, last I knew he had writer's block.
Yeah, now he's like, I got another book done. And it's like, wait a second, what? It was a little bit of a downhill. It was like maybe there was a couple months in between the last episode and this episode. I don't know. But yes, it was a little odd to me that all of a sudden Harris just has another book. Like literally, he just has another book.
Right.
I'm not saying it's lazy. I'm not saying they could have done a better job. It's just like, give us some context as to where the fuck this came from. Because to your point, the last time they talked about it, he literally had writer's block.
Yeah, I want to say there might have been one mention of not having writer's block, but
when?
Yeah, I think it was just in the last couple episodes, though. It was not that long ago. I mean, Blood on the Badge took almost the entire season. It felt
season 7 or 6 and 7 or something. It was not an insignificant amount of time that they spent. And now you know what this reminds me of? Literally reminds me of Death Star 2.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Where it's just we had another one sitting in the wings. Why?
Somehow Arnold Ripner.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. They needed to get Ripner back. I understand that. And I appreciate that. But the way the way they got him back is ridiculous.
Well, and I just was very surprised that he ends up popping Ripner right in the mouth. I'm like, what? You're gonna allow that, Barney? I would think there would be immediate action against Harris, but Barney seems okay with that.
And then we get can we talk about this other plot line? Because I have oh my God. I have a question for you.
Sure.
Miriam Beardnethery. Her character has penises in the freezer of her house, right?
Yeah.
She's a fucking murderer, no? She's a literal
stalker.
Yeah, yes, literally.
Yeah. Oh yeah, total stalker.
Yeah.
It's very funny because I thought that I was getting her and the lady, and I can't remember her name. Hopefully Richard's yelling at his podcast.
Oh, from Obituary?
No, the lady from Alice that played Flo on Alice, because she's another redhead and she looks somewhat similar, but two totally different actresses. And I know that she had been in this before. I think this is her third appearance on the show, fourth appearance, last appearance on the show. And I kind of wish that she had been in here as this same character a few times, maybe just to because this comes out of nowhere. This Beverly Wakefield character comes out of nowhere, and it's just oh, you finally caught me. I've been, stalking you since you were a fucking rookie.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
Fucking weird.
Yeah.
It's fucking weird. So she's been in 3 other episodes in season 5 and season 6 and season 7, and now this being her last episode. I'm so fucking confused as to how we're supposed to take this as anything other than immensely unsettling, deeply creepy.
Oh yeah. I mean, they play it for laughs, of course. They also played rape for laugh, a couple seasons ago.
It's true. They're very true. They very much did.
Yeah. I don't think that this would be taken as lightly these days, but yeah, because it's just weird that she's walking around with all these clippings and things. I'm like, oh, when the way she she plays the role very well, because the way she reacts to Barney, I'm just like, oh, there's something really wrong going on here. And it takes you the entire episode before you find out.
Yeah, and I don't get it. It's fucking weird. You have Ripner and Harris, which is, I think, the more important storyline. But I don't understand what is the point of the. I don't know. I don't know. I don't get it. I really don't understand.
Now, she was mugged, right?
And he like stopped the muggers from taking her purse.
Right. But I'm saying like with this new one, with like right now, she's in the precinct looking at mug books, and she eventually doesn't she finger Robert Pastorelli?
I think so.
Okay, yeah.
And she gets mugged in front of the police station.
Right. I would say that's pretty convenient.
Yeah.
Mm.
But then she's obsessed with Barney, and it's so weird because is she meant to be maternal? Because she looks like she's his age.
I know, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing for me. She
Well,
comes off very maternal, but it's like, is she meant to be?
Yeah. I mean, if anything, she looks maybe a little older than
Maybe,
him, but
just a little.
Yeah. I was very happy to see Todd Sussman back as the stockbroker who's just wasted to the gills, I guess, with all of these drugs, and he seems to be living his best life right now.
Yeah. Todd Sussman looks perfectly stoned the entire episode.
Oh, he's great. I mean, it's like so many of these actors are very familiar to me from other things, but Sussman and Henteloff, both of them classic MASH actors for me. So I'm just like, yep, okay. I've grown up with these faces, and Sussman's face, oh, it's just so good. It's got that hangdog look to him. It's so good.
He plays doped up really well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he's great. I mean, if it were me, I would have given what happened with Ripner and Harris a little bit more time.
Same.
Because I don't know, they don't. I'm of two minds here. It's that they don't make it seem like it was important enough, even though they already had. So it's like they kind of undid a lot of an entire season's worth of work with Ripner and Harris and Blood on the Badge. They undid all of it just so they could have a cheap gag of Harris punching Ripner in the face, which we don't even see, which ultimately goes nowhere.
Right.
And what we get to see some of the friction between Barney and Harris finally sort of maybe resolved. I don't even want to say it's been resolved. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the only resolution we're going to get. I doubt that Ripner's back for any of the finale. And yeah, this whole thing of like, oh, I love looking at your artwork on my wall, but then later on he's like, oh, I didn't get any money from this. I'm like,
yeah, like,
oh,
what
so
is he fucking talking about?
Yeah, like, can you sell the artwork? I imagine that Harris had some pretty nice pieces.
Yeah. I don't understand, either he did or he didn't get stuff. Like I'm very confused. It's almost like, again, it's almost like they shouldn't have done anything other than the Ripner storyline or the Ripner storyline and the creepy woman. But I think having a third storyline in there kind of gets in the way of everything. And that ends up being, at least for me, the stumbling block of the episode, because the stuff with Ripner just doesn't feel like it. As much as I appreciate them kind of finally putting a cap on the story, I don't think they did a very good job of it.
Yeah, one question that I wanted to ask Max Gail when we were talking with him was, when did they know that this was the final season? Like, did they go into this? It sounds like, and you guys will hear this later, it sounds like they knew that this was the last season because of his negotiation. Like, hey, I haven't directed, like I have an episode due for me, coming up here. Because I would have thought, yeah, to your point, they would have done more with the book story earlier, done more with Ripner, maybe even brought him back in earlier than this, and then had this be the resolution. Yeah, it's very strange.
It's very strange, and it doesn't really work. And it's kind of a waste of the Harris storyline because honestly, I was kind of okay with where they had left it.
Yeah, same here. And I would have
know?
been okay without Harris even writing another book.
Yeah, also that.
Yeah, because I also don't know what this book is about either.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's not like, because Wojo asks him, like, am I in this one? He's like, oh, no. I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. Which also that also begs the other question, like, what the fuck was Harris writing about?
Right.
Like,
I mean,
what?
it'd be pretty cool if it was like a sci-fi book or something. Fish 2049.
Fish 2069. Fish 6940.
I'm very curious if they will address that in those next three. I mean, I'm on tenterhooks right now about how this whole thing wraps up, because it's very smart the way they plant the seed in the next episode with Bones, where we have the rifle. And I know that rifle is going to be a big deal coming up. And this whole thing, I mean, it starts off like a regular Barney Miller, where it's like, oh, there's no water. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we haven't had something like that happen for a little while. Like, I think it was super cold in there. They didn't have any heat, but like, we've seen flooding, we've seen all of this stuff happening, but Precinct's been pretty good for the last couple seasons. But now this one, it's, oh, we don't have any water. And I don't get the joke of the Spanish guy who comes in and is the repairman, and he starts speaking to them in Spanish, even though he can speak perfect English.
Right.
Well, not perfect English, some pretty good English.
Yeah, I really like the janitor with Harris, or not with Harris, with Levitt. I thought that was I thought that was really smart, kind of giving Levitt someone to kind of be an advocate for him, who's, in a similar position that he is, like, kind of looked down on by everybody, kind of treated poorly by everybody. And I think it's interesting because it's taken this long to essentially the second to last episode of the show. Because the next episode, when we do our next episode, it's technically all one episode. Right. So, it's interesting that they finally have somebody advocating for Levitt other than himself, because nobody's really done that for him up until this point.
No. And you would think somebody would. You would think, gosh, I mean, Barney really should recognize the talent that Levitt has. These words are coming out of my mouth, and I'm surprised. Like, oh, like 5 seasons ago, I would have been like, get this guy out of here. But it's
That's
like,
right.
I fucking love Levitt now. So it's like, yeah, like he really wants to do a good job, and he's trying his best. He might be misdirected sometimes, but he really wants to do a good job.
Right. And he also doesn't appreciate being treated as kind of a nuisance by Barney and them, which I think what's interesting is this episode, I thought it was going to come to a head, and then it kind of goes nowhere.
Oh yeah. Just really backs down very quickly.
Yeah. I didn't understand what was the deal with that. Did you?
No, I was like, oh, okay, finally Levitt's going to just let him have it with both barrels. But no, it just kind of turns the other way very quickly.
And at the same time, we do get to see Levitt kind of lose it. Right?
Oh, yeah.
A little bit, but not as much as I would have thought.
Yeah.
I mean, he gets mad, and he's like covered in poop at one point, I'm assuming, or dirt or mud or whatever that is. Like,
yeah, I'm not sure what that's supposed to be, because I don't know what they're working on. I mean, obviously a wall falls in later on, and I guess maybe it was the wall doing that. Yeah. It's funny because basically Levitt's going out the same way he came in, because remember when he was the mole digging through, before he was Levitt, and he looked almost the exact same with all the dirt all over his face.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. And boy, what a weird callback to like, what, fucking 5 seasons ago?
Yeah. Before Little Levitt was even Little Levitt.
Yeah. No, I like the idea of him finally feeling so put upon that he's like, I'm fucking done here with you guys. But it's like, it's come too late. Like,
yeah,
unless they come back to it, which I guess in Landmark they might, but it feels like there's more important things to deal with now.
Yeah. Now they're going to have to wrap up 8 seasons worth of stuff all in 3 episodes.
It's about 60 minutes, right?
Yeah, pretty much, with all the commercials taken out. Yeah.
What are your expectations for the last episode of the show? Because you've never seen it, or you have?
I probably saw it, but when it originally aired. So it's been a minute since 1982. So I was having my 10th birthday. This year I'm having my 53rd. So it's a little, yeah. My expectation, boy, because obviously the A story is going to be all about this. Well, it might not even be the A story, but the whole thing is going to center on the rifle, and that it's a artifact of some sort, and that they're going to close down the 1-2 and turn it into a historical monument or something. That's
Right.
my feeling. Now, I haven't read ahead. Otto, I love you, but I can't read to the end of the book yet. I gotta stay back from that stuff. So that, but then as far as like, it feels like it's just going to be a cavalcade of guest stars and just have all of these people that we've seen throughout the years coming back. Now, I haven't looked this up, but I seem to remember the last time we saw Barbara Barry, we said, and we'll see her again in the finale.
No.
We won't?
No, I don't think so.
Holy shit. Okay. I thought for sure we would get her. I don't think we might get a Fish appearance. Maybe.
I don't think so.
Really?
I don't think so.
Gosh.
Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know.
Take some prop bets here on a 50-year-old episode of a show.
Right,
Do we think Fish is going to show up? If memory serves, I don't think Barbara Barry shows up. If memory serves, I don't think Abe Vigoda shows up. But I think Scanlon shows up.
Scanlon would make sense.
James Gregory shows up.
We better have fucking Luger, man.
Right.
If we don't have Luger, I'm going to be pissed.
Yeah.
And he's got to come back. Well, no, that's the thing. I think we determined that his wife is not going to be shown again.
Right. I assume they're going to mention her in some passing, way. That's my expectation, anyways. Yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping that they can tie everything together, but at the same time, like, I feel like they're going to focus more on the building than anything else.
No, I think it's going to be the people. I think they will. I mean, Barney is so invested in the community and these people he's been helping out for so many years.
Right.
I mean, what are these guys going to do? Are they just going to go off to other precincts?
I think that for me is going to be the part that I'm going to have a hard time watching, is that the last moment of the last episode is not going to be a pleasant experience for either one of us. I feel like, I think we're probably both going to be in the throes of some emotion, because I mean, we spent a lot, and I think that this is, like anything else, I think it's a good and a bad thing, but we have been covering this show for a very long time. We have been covering this show since 2020.
Yeah, you're right. We started this right after the pandemic started, I think.
Yeah. Life is so drastically different now from where it was then for both of us in so many ways. And yet Barney Miller has been a consistent thing. I mean, literally, like, we started the Kolchak show by I mean you put out the kind of call to somebody to be on the Kolchak show with you. And this has come from that. And, Kolchak didn't get an ending, not like this show is going to. And this is going to be, I think, the first thing that we've ever watched together that has some semblance of an ending, like some semblance of a conclusion, some finality to it. Because when we did Rankin and Bass with Richard, who will be joining us on our final episode, that just kind of stopped. I mean, we just kind of determined we're done. With this, it's like, once we watch Landmark 1, 2, and 3, there's nothing else. There's no more Barney Miller. We could go watch their Family Feud appearances or $10,000 Pyramid or whatever, but this is it. And I'm hoping the show does a good job at landing the plane, because for 99% of the time, this has been one of the most consistent shows I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's only been a handful of times where we've said not good enough.
Yeah.
Just this doesn't work. Doesn't work for us.
Yeah.
And
And that's infrequent at best.
oh yeah. I mean, I don't remember offhand how many. Oh, I can look it up. There's 170 episodes of Barney Miller. And for me to say a handful haven't been good.
Yeah. We have done, I think this is either episode 54 or 55. And I would say broadly, almost every episode of our show that we've talked about, we've been at least able to find one or two of the 3 episodes that we've liked. And that is not the case on so many of the things that we have watched together.
I think the only time we got a total blindside by all 3 were those Dorsey episodes.
I didn't dislike him as much as you did, but you're right. I mean, those I think might be a bridge too far. And I mean, look, Wojo's Girl, I think has its problems.
Well, it was a very uneven. I know Wojo's Girl wasn't the 7th season, but the 7th season felt like the most uneven one.
Yes, agreed.
And season 8 has felt much more like, okay, we're going back to the well in a good way. We're seeing some real things that we want to see. And we're seeing familiar faces. We're seeing some familiar plot lines, but we're getting some good storytelling.
Yeah. I know. I completely agree. I've actually found season 8 to be rather pleasant in terms of what it's done, where it's gone, the storylines that it's kind of spent its time on. No, I've enjoyed season 8 immensely. I have very little trepidation going into the final episode because, from everything that Max Gail told us, from everything that I've read in Otto Bruno's book, from the files of the old one too, which you can find at Bear Manor Media, I don't think even with the 7th season being kind of middle of the road, it was still much better than most things like that. Holy shit, we've done episodes of other shows where nothing has been worth talking about, and we have struggled to spend 45 minutes talking about anything. I don't think we've ever struggled to talk about this show. Not in any substantive way, anyways.
No, we've definitely had a much harder time when it comes to like Twilight Zone 85.
Right. Which you wouldn't think would be the case given that this is a sitcom. Right. Given that this is like theoretically, for me, this should be the hardest thing to talk about. Neither one of us spend any amount of time talking about comedies on our respective movie podcasts because they're not easy to talk about because you end up just going, remember this one funny line, remember this other funny line. But I honestly think that talking about Barney Miller every month for the last 5 years has helped me learn how to talk about comedies better because they are genuinely one of the hardest things to talk about. And I mean, we do the Chevy Chase podcast together, you, I, and Mark Begley, and those are all primarily comedies. And I'm not sure we ever would have done that if we hadn't been doing something like Barney Miller, where we're forcing ourselves to be critical and kind of, objective about comedy, even though comedy is in so many ways the most subjective of subjective things, because there are plenty of comedy that just don't work for people, like just doesn't work at all. And that's comedy is very subjective in that regard. And I think objectively Barney Miller is a great show, one of the best shows ever made. And I think subjectively it's one of the funniest shows ever made because it still makes me laugh. And the show came out in the late 80s or in the late 70s, early 80s. And it's still making me laugh in my 30s in 2024, damn near 50 years later. So
pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Very impressive. Yeah. I wonder if talking about Police Squad might have helped us out a little bit there too because it's tough to talk about comedy.
It's the hardest thing.
Yeah. I feel like we're giving this one a little bit of a short shrift, this Bones episode, but you do get to hear a lot more about it when we're talking with Max. So listen to me call him Max with Mr. Gail.
Mr. Gail, yeah. Our friend Max Gail. Well, I mean, that's the weird thing, getting to talk to Max Gail, because we've already obviously recorded it as we're recording this episode. It was really, pinch myself, I'm dreaming that we were getting to talk to Max Gail. And Max, if you are listening, thank you so much for, I think, making the show, one of the things that, like, again, as someone who is 34 years old, who was not even alive when the show was on, I was still what? God, 8 years from being born when the show went off the air, for fuck's sake. Like, yeah, man, the show goes off the air so Bones airs April 30th, 1982. I'm born April 22nd, 1990. I mean, like, this show is on long before I'm even an inkling in anybody's mind, especially in my parents. But getting to talk to Max Gail was, I don't know, like, I've talked to a lot of actors, as I know you have, but I've never spent so much time with someone as I have with Max Gail, like, genuinely.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, and I can't even imagine. Yeah, we'll talk about this more next month when we talk about Landmark, but just this letting somebody into your living room for so long. I mean, yes, the show ran for normal people 8 years. For us, it's gone 5 years. That's still 5 years of our lives where every month we're checking out 3 episodes of this show and just most of the time laughing our asses off and just having a great time with it. And yeah, you form these relationships with these fictional characters that you see walk around on screen, and it really means something.
And, I think, you'll hear me ask Max Gail about it in the interview. I ask him because, and this was something I kind of wanted to bring up as we kind of reach the nadir of this show. But it was interesting because Max says in the interview that he perceived him and Barney in the show as having a older brother, younger brother relationship, and as opposed to a father-son relationship. And once he explained why, I kind of understood more, and I agree. I think after rewatching the episodes today, in not in hindsight, but in after the fact of hearing him say that and hearing him talk about kind of his interpretation of their relationship. I mean, I think it is like older brother, bigger brother in a lot of ways. Like, and I wanted to kind of bring that up because this show and previously Kolchak, the Night Stalker, the Kolchak tapes, these are the two shows that, like, you and I have really become friends, and like you and I have become, I think, like, genuine creative partners. And I look up to you immensely, as I know the character of Wojciehowicz does to Barney in the show. And so I'm just passing that along to you, as you always joke about me being the rookie. Well, I appreciate it, and I do internalize that I probably have more Wojciehowicz in me than I would like to admit. I don't know about my love of sex workers. Maybe that's a Wojciehowicz thing that stays with him. But
that's all me. I mean, that's what I was doing this evening when I couldn't make it back home on time to.
Oh, okay. Oh, that was you. Okay. But
no, I'm frequent solicitor. So
no, you're more the Barney of the two of us. You're more level-headed and that's what I appreciate about you and your friendship and the creative kind of spirit that you bring to the things that we do. Because to your point, and again, to pull back the curtain on this a little bit, I mean, we've been doing the show for 5 years. Like, we've been doing this show for 5 fucking years. I've known you for only about 9 years. We have been right. We've been doing this show for about half of our friendship. Like, this show has been the biggest in terms of like long-term project. This is the longest term project I've worked on that has like a conclusion to it. And so, yeah, I mean, again, because Culture Cast, I don't think it has any end date in sight. Projection Booth doesn't have any end date in sight. And so this is kind of like, I mean, we spent 5 years with Hal Linden and Max Gail, really, and Ron Glass, and to be able to get to talk to one of the 3, one of the 2 surviving is kind of, I mean, that's the other thing that bums me out. I mean, I wish we could have done this show 15 years ago. Like, can you imagine doing this show at like the early days of podcasting when Landisberg and Levitt and, Ron Carey and Ron Glass were all alive? Like, and you could have just got like all of them, because at one point Otto got some of them. I mean, Otto got in a lot of ways a lot more than we did, which is why we're such big advocates for his book. But I mean, that's the other thing that's hard about this show, is at some point there will be no one left from this show. And the only way that people are going to find it, I guess, is by word of mouth, or because that's my concern here. And that's kind of what I always wanted to be part of in making, creative content, is preserving things that matter to me. And at some point there will be no one left from this show. And I don't know who's going to talk about this show at that point. And at some point, there will be people who did not see this show live. There will be people who have only ever seen this show because their mom and dad told them about it, or they saw it on Nick at Night with their grandma or something to that effect. And I don't know about you, but for me, being part of the preservation of these kinds of things, as maybe pedantic and banal as our commentary might be to some people, and I'm not saying we think it's that, but I understand if people don't like what we have to say.
Yeah. Why are they talking about this show? They don't even like it.
That's not true. We've spent so much time watching this show. If you don't think we like this show, you need to have your fucking head examined, frankly. But it's crazy to me because I've always wanted to be part of the preservation and the adoration of things that other people make, because, I don't think, as I'm sure you would agree, like sometimes it's the hardest thing to do is be an advocate for yourself. So other people advocating for you is really important. And I don't think Barney Miller is a show that needs us advocating for it, but yet nobody's talking about it in 2024. We are but it's not like people my age broadly know what Barney Miller is, which seems like kind of a shame because people my age know about all the other cop shows like Law and Order or Criminal Minds or NYPD Blue or all those shows that, again, varying degrees of quality, portrayal of police officers. But that's the other thing. And again, in our divisive and divided times, I know that cops are kind of a dirty word, but like Barney Miller shows what I think we all wish cops would be.
Oh,
the idealized concept of the police. And you hear Max talk about it because he doesn't really get into it, but he mentions like kind of being at odds with the fact that he's playing a police officer, but he has mixed feelings on the police because again, he's playing a cop in a cop show, but he's also a very in tune guy. Very in tune, which we both obviously appreciate it a lot, but yeah.
Well, just to hear I took these gigs so I could basically help fund all of these movements and these people that I respect and want to help. I'm like, that's so super admirable to be like,
I wish I could be that fucking cool,
Oh, I know, right?
Yeah, I know. I wish I could be that cool. I wish that I had the platform to do as much as Max Gail has. Or Larry Hagman was the same way. Like a lot of those, a lot of actors you don't think about or don't know a whole lot about were really banging the drum, no pun intended, for a lot of the causes. Because like you said, Bones is kind of getting a short shrift because we want to let Max talk about it. But I will kind of say, I also think that the Indian storyline in the episode kind of gets short shrift, frankly.
It does, yeah.
It really does, in kind of an unfortunate way, given the fact that we know how much Max Gail, the person, cares about the indigenous people's plight and the causes of the indigenous people of our country. And yet here he is directing essentially the penultimate episode of the show, and they kind of sideline the main storyline that is the title of the episode. It's not great. Feels kind of bad, to be honest.
Yeah. And even having Ivor Francis on here, I was just like, okay, cool. This is going to be good. He's barely in it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have a question here. So it's 1982. They're making jokes about scoutmasters having sex with scouts in 1982, yeah?
Are they?
Isn't that what that is? Aren't they?
I did not pick up on that at all. I thought this guy
was talking about going into the woods with him, and he's like, I know what happens when we go into the woods with people like you. He does say that. The kid does say that to the scoutmaster.
True.
So I was like, was this a thing in 82 that people knew about?
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure because my wife's cousin who's gay, he had his first experience with a scoutmaster. So
oh dear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And he's 62 years old. So yeah, it's been going on for a while.
Yeah. I guess not that it's been going on, but that people have been tuned into it.
Right.
Because I was a little surprised when Barney Miller was like, hey, I was like, wait, what? Wait a second. I didn't, Barney Miller, we didn't need this. What the fuck?
Yeah. I mean, because this guy, the Scoutmaster, played by Howard Platt, who we've seen before, he was one of those prep people that was living underground with the homeless.
That's right.
Yeah. Also fantastic in MASH, another familiar face. But yeah, he seems like a very, very decent guy, and he just wants to help people out. And I think he like foil a crime, right?
Yeah, you would beat the shit out of a mugger who
Right.
picked the wrong person to mug. Don't mug a Scoutmaster. Though I didn't know Scoutmasters were known for being so tough.
Yeah. I guess it's all of the maybe their hands are strong from making all those fires or something. I don't know.
I guess my Scoutmaster is technically like the Scoutmaster that I had when I was a scout is trained. I don't know. He's like a black belt or something in like Japanese like katanas and shit. So he's like, so I guess I wouldn't want to fuck with him, to be fair.
Sure.
This guy, I mean, Howard Platt does look like he could kick your ass 6 ways from sundown. So he's a big dude, imposing.
Yes.
Imposing.
Yeah.
Dude.
And yeah, because wasn't he also, because he's basically trying to like recruit the one kid, like you're saying.
Panchito Gomez. What a great name for an actor. Panchito Gomez.
And who so reminds me, talking about going all the way back to earlier episodes, he kind of reminds me of like an alternate version of the guy who is trying to hold up. I think that might have been A. Martinez, who is trying to hold up the station in both of those, Ramon, the pilot, and The Life and Times of Captain Barney Miller, the pilot. I think the robber guy was the same person.
Bringing us all the way
back. It's kind of like
the first goddamn episode of the fucking
redemption
show.
for Ramon.
Redemption is spelled Ramon. Ramon. Yeah, exactly. It was. I mean, look, I think for me, the most endearing part of the episode was Luis Avalos as the janitor. For me, Jorge Jesus Maria Sanchez, which also great name.
Yeah.
But I again, like you said it, and I'll let Richard Haddam hear it from the mountaintops. Yes, Richard, we like Ron Carey a lot now, and him having someone advocate for him in this episode was, I think, for me, one of the best moments of the entire show. I'm not kidding. That scene where the janitor goes to bat for him, I actually was like, wow, this is a moment that the show earned in the last couple seasons. It really earned it. So, no, I actually really like this episode. I just wish they had actually, given Max Gail's storyline time to, just give it time.
Right. Well, I think we should quit teasing the people and actually line up and play this interview. What do you think?
Give the people what they want.
To start off, you are a local legend for me because I grew up in Riverview, so right across the water from Groseal.
Oh, no shit. Excuse me. Oh, incredible.
So when you were on the air and just a young pup starting off with Barney Miller and some of your earlier projects, you were, of course, all over the free press, the news. Just, hey, the local boy made good.
When I would go back to Detroit at times and go down to Groseal maybe to drive around or for whatever reasons, and I would see how much that whole area changed from when I was growing up. You go across the toll bridge, we called it. On Groseal, there was the free bridge and the toll bridge. But I used to ride through there on my little homemade motor scooter to Wyandotte to rehearse with the guys there in the rock and roll band I was in. Billy Solomosi and Tommy Moran, all Poles are Irish. Man, when you went across that bridge and hit there, the Wyandotte chemical smell hit you, and what is now all kind of grasslands or open space along the river there, it was very industrial.
Yeah, we used to get the nighttime light up from McLeod Steel when they would bring out the steel in the evening. Yeah.
We would go and park it in high school at the north end of the island, which was mostly dumpings from the steel and other things over the years. So there was this kind of extended area where you could go and usually find a safe place to park and make out. The night sky was McLeod Steel.
How did you decide to become an actor?
It's more that at a certain point, more closer to now than back then, I recognized, okay, this is what I can do. It's what I'm drawn to doing. It's what has worked out for me in a way. On the other hand, it was always there. My mother had been an actor. She was 21 when she started having kids, and she had 4 pregnancies, and 3 of them were twins. So she had 5 kids in 3 years and all 7 kids in 6 years. But she acted in the local amateur theater and stuff. My dad had been piano player, had a band in the big band era. As we were growing up, he was booking the bands of the guys who had been in his band. So he had an agency. He had a small office supply store in downtown Detroit and one Wyandotte that he opened because he'd been stationed at the Navy base down there. So that's how he got to Grosse Ile and had all these kids when the war was over. And we all grew up there. It wasn't like it was a really weird things for someone to go there, but it was much more my twin sister or my younger brother. People would have thought, if you'd asked anybody when we were all in high school, who's going to have an acting career, I would have been down low on that list. And it just kept showing up in a way. After college, I took a teaching job outside of Detroit up in Grosse Pointe at a private school. They didn't care that I had no teaching credentials or anything. I'd gone to an Eastern college and played sport. Went to a small school back east. That's what the dads wanted who were sending their boys to this school. That's what they were hoping their boys would be. So I got hired. And after 2 years of that, I just felt stifled or locked in by the situation. And I went out to Ann Arbor. I could still get in the business school, still for applications. And I ended up as an economics major. So I got into the business school. I always say I was majoring in staying out of Vietnam because at that time, it wasn't so strongly politically. I was actually in my 30s. I was talking with my mom one night. Her dad my grandfather was a World War I psychological casualty. I knew him as the great old Irish grandfather, but she knew him as a guy with what they would now call PTSD, who had a very up and down life personality and stuff. And so she planted in the brains of my brother and I, if you can do something else, don't get caught up in that. In the business school, you could take a course outside of the business school as long as a graduate level course, so that you could take a real estate law course or an engineering course or something like that. I couldn't get in the art school because I didn't have any portfolio or anything. Looking through all the things that were available, they had this class in the drama department. I thought, we'll look at movies and write papers. I can handle that. And I talked my way into it in a way. So that's another story in a way. But I'd learned you could come back late and having missed registration. University of Michigan was like 30,000 students registering over a few days with classes that people were camped out to get into a PhD seminar or something. But if you come a few days later because your grandmother died or something, a situation I discovered by accident, but then I saw, okay. So I went and talked to the professor, and I was with a guy I was on the rugby team, big Russian Jewish football player, played a couple of years with the Steelers, but I was into landscape architecture. Anyway, I got in that class. It was an interesting time. So then when I did make it to 26 and I did get my MBA and I left, and I'd hooked up with my sort of junior high sweetheart who had moved out to California. So I headed out to San Francisco and was not sure what I wanted to do or what I was going to do. I was playing piano bar gigs and I took the law boards, and there was a kind of a situation, a play had opened up based on the novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Douglas had bought the rights and hired Dale Wasserman, who went on to write the book for to write the play. Nurse Ratched was a comic villain. Billy Bibbit didn't commit suicide. It was a lightened up thing. Didn't run very long. But some years later, a couple of guys in San Francisco produced and rewrote parts of the play to make it more like the book, which is narrated by the chief, the half-breed Indian guy. And anyway, I had read that. I had picked up that book on the floor where my roommate left it in the bathroom and read it straight through. And I also had read Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee around that same time as I headed out to California. When I got to San Francisco, a group of Native Americans called themselves Indians of all tribes, I think, but they had occupied Alcatraz. The prison had been closed. There was a lot of conversation in the press and politics. It should be a park. It should be a gambling casino. It should be condos. And a bunch of natives went over because there is a treaty that says if the federal government abandons lands, they need to go back to the original owners. But eventually they got them off. They shut off the power and everything. They held out there for quite a while, but they weren't quite able to make it stick. A while later, they did. Over at Davis, California, there was a Navy base that got abandoned, and there was also the same. Reagan was governor. We're going to make it a primate center for the University of California. They won the right to create a Chicano Native American University, Dakota Quetzalcoatl. And it's still in operation. They were forced to get it going in 2 years, and a lot of things that made it a challenge, but they won that. But in this case, that was going on. And I happened to see, so they opened up production amateur over in Mill Valley it got a good response, so they decided to go for it, and they opened up production down on kind of North Beach area, San Francisco, this little theater, and got a great review, not from the regular critics. They didn't think much of it, but Herb Cain, who was the columnist, San Francisco Chronicle at days, they gave it a great review. They had a run on their hands. They put out some things for people to run the snack bar and for understudies. And I kind of a mistake that one was for understudies was in want ads. I happened to see it. I had just taken the law boards around that time. I was playing a piano bar gig from 5 to 9. I'd keep going to school. I couldn't see any. And when I'd go in to meet with IBM or Levi Strauss or something for young, they would know better than I did that I wasn't going to fit in there. I'm supposed to know that, but you're not supposed to see that. And I went down and I ended up being asked to understudy the chief. And a few days before I could ever rehearse it or anything, the guy playing the chief had this ongoing artistic conflict with one of the other actors over this style of acting. And he couldn't stand it, but he was a big weightlifter and the other guy was a string bean. And he gave him a push after the curtain call, and the rest of the cast said, okay, that's enough. Next thing I know, I get a message, be at the theater at 6, and they showed me where to be standing when the lights shut down and the light would come up on. I was playing the chief, and that ended up going on for 2 years, during which I got a speaking part in a TV show. I got my first line in a movie in Dirty Harry, just a last minute thing that they decided to have a couple of hoods hold him in the tunnel, and he pulled out his big Dirty Harry gun. And another movie was the second Mr. Tibbs movie called The Organization. It had a lot of young actors from Raul Julia and I became friends on that film, and Ron O'Neill and some of the young guys from New York were cast and brought out to San Francisco. And so I was having this understanding I was getting of something about acting and theater that I'd never known. I call it the mask off part. There's the mask on part of theater, as there is in life. The roles we play, as Shakespeare said, we're all actors on the stage. But there's the other part where even if you're pretending to be someone else or looking for some kind of truth through imagination, you're opening in a way that you might not, certainly in public. Life might bring you there. But all that time, I still was kind of like, this is what I'm doing now. But I thought I'd take it down. I went down to LA, got involved with the Actors Studio. So I was doing stuff. When I was drawn to the connection that people had and the commitment to act theater and what it is as something ancient but still I was not really, and that's still what I was doing at the time, and had done the play in New York, and then I started running long distances on the beach where I had bootlegged into a place that I could afford in a way. And I started processing a lot of my own just life growth, simple spiritual things that had been going on for me that was really driving my looking to find out what is this all about. And I started processing that in rhyme, and which I would usually do to say something to my folks at Christmas time or something like that, or sometimes surprise me. But it was a way of expressing emotions and other kinds of sentiments. So I thought, oh, that's what this acting is about, getting me to hear. So it was more into the creativity. And around that time, I got the Barney Miller interview, and then they offered me the part to do the pilot. They'd done the show once, and the pilot was not picked up. Danny convinced, they bought out his partner. The guy made way more money off of Barney Miller than I ever, but I never met him. He told me, well, I had a guy doing this part. I've given it a different name because things might change, but he's not available. Charlie Haid, it was. You guys probably know that if you're that much into the show. I did that. I thought, I'll take the money for the pilot and I'll go up to Big Sur, where I knew some friends that had a big house on the hill with a big deck on a main layer. So the basement layer actually looked down the hill out underneath the main deck and down through the oaks out to the ocean. It had a futon and an upright piano, and that was it. And I knew I could rent that place for nothing. I thought, I'm going to go there and write songs. That's happening for me. But the pilot got picked up right away, and it was fun. And she just said, okay, I'm going to go give it a shot. There are certain things that bothered me because the character was written like a Polish joke in a way. And I felt obligated to the ways it was being played and the way I read for Danny, real broad, chewing gum. But one of the pilot episodes that was with Wojo comes in doing karate.
Thank you for mentioning that, because it was one of the things that I brought up so many times. Every time we'd watch an episode, I'd be like, why is he doing karate in the intro?
What happened, I said to Danny, and this is part how this take on the show worked, but the stuff at home didn't work. It was like watching Danny Thomas show. But I think it was, I said to Danny, I need to get some time off or something. I need to learn some karate. So his first comment was, you don't know karate? I thought every young actor knew karate. And I said, no, I don't. He says, they just kind of go around like this and shout stuff at each other. I say, nah. And I said, nah, I know enough about it that I know there's more to it than that. And if we were doing kind of a skit on a variety show or something, then fine. But if we're supposed to be really cops and I'm supposed to be really a Marine, he says, okay, I'll get somebody. So he went and hired, like at the time, the best guy, big Hawaiian guy, I've forgotten his name, but to come over to this set. And so we're talking and I was fairly fit and stuff, but Danny says, so you guys shout stuff at each other, right? He says, no, that's not what that is. Danny, really? You sure? It sounds like it. So he taught me some moves, but it would have been interesting if Wojo really could kill you with his thumb, if he really had some skills. And yet there's so much more I could have done with that as an actor. But all I did was that and thinking still, what was bothering me was he wants to be on the stakeout, and Barney finally says, okay. And okay, well, I'm going to get bazookas and what. I knew I didn't want to play him as a Vietnam guy that was like a loser Rambo. You know what I mean? Most of the Vietnam guys were played as some version of somebody that's totally fucked up or else has this other kind of set. I mean, Stallone had a great way of creating a kind of heroic version of him. He was a great storyteller and all, but that wasn't in me. And all that stuff bothered me, but when the show got picked up and I had to think, and I went down to Yucatan with an old rugby friend of mine from San Francisco who was himself working through, he was at a moment of, do I go down this direction or not? And I remember at one point he was talking and he gave a kind of a shrug like Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. Are you guys familiar with Fiddler on the Roof? When he's got it on his day, on one hand, my daughter, she's this and she loves this guy and all of that. And on the other hand, tradition. And in the end, he goes, on the one hand, the other, he's got his hands there and he's tradition. He decides, it was kind of like, what the fuck? And I decided that what it would be is that while Wojo had some kind of understanding about Poles and the role of Poland or some Poles during the Holocaust and the roles of others. And he didn't have a whole kind of intellectual thing he built around, but he had something and about a sense of justice and kind of respect for that part of Barney, which Danny, when he first met with Hal, he says, because he went after Hal to play that part. Hal had won the Tony for the Rothschilds, which now many people want to blame them for everything. This was a show about them rising above prejudice and all that stuff like that. But for Wojo, there was just respect there that kept him from judgment. And his experiences in Vietnam, which I never tried to nail down so much about. I knew many people who'd been in Vietnam and some who'd been on the front lines and walked the point and stuff like that, and others who'd been medics. But instead of going the way of really working on the karate and maybe being a Marine and what all those things might have meant, along that time, I had these songs I started to write, and a friend of mine was working with Buffy St. Marie, and she shared some songs with Buffy, who at that point, Buffy, I don't know if you're familiar with Buffy St. Marie, but so she was on Sesame Street. Her message was pretty strong and uncompromising in a way that as things evolved out of the 60s, particular protest songs and stuff like that, Dylan had his own way. He was always not quite coming down on it. He didn't let himself get drawn into it that way. But anyway, she invited me to be a part of this tour, which in the end didn't happen. But through Buffy, I met a number of Native American people, some of whom I'd been watching on TV or Time magazine. Dennis Banks was acknowledged as one of the leaders of the American Indian movement, certainly when Wounded Knee was going on, and other people, Floyd Westerman, who was a singer-songwriter, could have been the Indian Charlie Pride, a wonderful country singer. He said once, I would have been the drunken Indian Charlie Pride. Because the things that those people knew, a lot of Dennis, Floyd, a lot of had been in the boarding school system. I connected with them at a time was really life-saving for me because otherwise it was a time of John Belushi. I knew John when I was doing the Cuckoo's Nest in New York. John was doing Lemmings. It was a play. Chevy Chase was in it. A lot of the Saturday night first cast came out of that play. It was a spoof of Woodstock called Lemmings. So that really was including, I would always be invited to go to either ceremony, and I started to get a connection into spirituality in ways that then it brought me to an understanding of the Christianity that I've been raised in our town's one Protestant church, generic Episcopal church, but until the town grew and the Presbyterians peeled off over here and the Lutherans peeled off over there. And now it's competition for people in the seats to pay for that new church and stuff. And the Catholic Church, they got their own thing. And I went down that road until there was no answers about Vietnam or civil rights or something. I went into science, into Carl Jung. Anyway, so at the time, there was a lot of ways of understandings that didn't cause me to jettison anything I'd come to before. It actually helped me to understand it and see it fit together and stuff, because there are a lot of profound understandings in those cultures as well. And so all of this is background on what that meant to me about the Native American and bones. Okay. Because often when Indian people were in town, they'd come over to the shed, very often showed up with 8 or 10 people. It was all right. But at the same time, it was not, a lot of it was seen as very radical, what I was involved, except that I wasn't radical about it. Some of the things I got involved with did without there being discussion about it, like the Agent Orange show, the way they went at it. So we had done a show where an old Indian wants to die in Central Park and played by a wonderful actor, very distinguished and stuff. Yeah. It could have been done as a real homeless person. In a way, if there was, what the writers didn't understand is there was somebody that was that together and that in touch with what that was. There were a lot of people that knew who they were paying attention to. More and more people. It was actually something that had passed the Native American Freedom of Religion Act in 1977. So people didn't have to go underground to do ceremony. There were a lot of things that I had come to know that the writers didn't. And there was a limit to how far I felt it was okay to go in terms of it was more like now how to play those, how to find it, and then how to find it in Wojo. It was his experience. Could have been Wojo had experience with Native Americans in Vietnam. A lot of higher percentage of Native Americans joined the armed services than any other ethnic group. But it was the response was so high, it was the only time they ever replayed a show in the season that it was first on. During the prime time, they actually showed it. And I suddenly realized maybe it was in a rerun, but I know it was the first time they re-showed during the same season because it got such a great response. So when it came time to negotiate for the last year, I made it as a part of my deal that we would do another show about Native Americans. I didn't usually get all that involved. I had an old agent. You originally signed for a certain amount and bumps. But if the show gets picked up, everybody understands you're going to come back. Didn't work well for people who quit and left their shows. There were some great examples of people that quit and left. And
I'm thinking of Gregory Sierra.
With Gregory had a deal with the network to get his own show. And then they said, we're going to put you into this show, and then we'll spin you on. He accepted it. It wasn't like he had a lot of options. And he was wonderful. Strong heart and a tender heart at the same time, delicate. So there was a time when Hal had said something in an interview. Somebody asked him, how do you feel about it? You're putting people in a jail cell. We take it seriously. And sometimes we send people off to Bellevue, but we play it like this is what we got to do. And this is what our job is, but we don't take it. As a matter of fact, he said one of our actors has done time. And Gregory, a lot of his family didn't know that he had done some time. And he thought it was obvious and intentional on Al's part to out him. And he announced that he was not going to have any conversation with Al Linden anymore. So for a couple of shows, we did it that way. But it was crazy. We're rehearsing the scene. Well, you tell Mr. Linden that I think it would be better if we did the scene. And so there was a time where I was in the midst of them and I edged it in a way where they had to start talking to each other. And then Danny came down and they went up to the office to see this has got to stop. And it did. But I think Gregory had a lot of reason to feel like people were shorting him on integrity-wise. And so when it came to doing the spinoff as a hospital show, Gregory didn't have the accent Chano had. And he did Shakespeare stuff. So he thought he was going to play a doctor, but he was not going to be using this accent. And Danny kind of felt like, I don't know how to write for him if he's not doing the accent. That's where I get that it's funny. So it had things going again. But his reason for making that choice was he was trying to get what he felt he had earned. And then the other one was the network. Danny's deal with producers is if the network likes somebody and thinks they can spin it off and make more money, that's what they do. He can't really say, I'm not going to do that. And Abe had come back first, like a year and a half response to Fish, which was wonderful. And he felt that he was primarily responsible for that. And in a way he was, but Danny felt in the writing this great old character that he was primarily responsible, and they both were, but he wanted them to change the name of the show to Fish and Barney and stuff. So when it came to doing the spinoff, Danny certainly had more being Jewish, and he had more to bring to it, but it just didn't work. It didn't quite, at first it did. And I remember Danny and Hal would go, we'd be getting together for the table read or something. How did you see those ratings? They were good. They'd both be kind of shaking their heads in a way. They didn't quite understand what it was about Abe's way of working. They didn't necessarily hear the music of the lines. His way of working, he says, you try to be as much in the scene as possible. When it comes to saying the line, you let your mind be as free as a bird. I mean, they were like, what the fuck does that mean? Now you look at each other like, what? Oh,
He's a method. Where you're saying Abe Vigoda's a method actor?
well, in a way, there's what is the method? There's lots of discussion and debate about what is the method. What is it? It gets overused, and a lot of people misunderstand it as doing certain. But certainly, it's not the same as hearing a certain sort of rhythm and beat and stuff that's a part of vaudeville and a whole history that's there. And so Abe didn't go with that. During the breaks, he would sit at his desk where the rest of us would go make phone calls and go to the bathroom. He'd just sit at Fish's desk and twirl pencils or something, just stay in that. So there were times where the joke was Fish gets up and goes to the bathroom. And in the first year and a half or so, when we still had a studio audience, he'd be into that space. And I think that was a part of why when he got up and went to the bathroom, it was funny. But also a part of it was the whole setup that led to Fish getting up and going to the bathroom. But those would be the parts that, because we would shoot for the audience and then the audience would go home and then we'd start back in and do the whole thing, because sometimes the audience was too ready to laugh at the big, and that gets you starting to head point to the joke. It's a certain thing where with Barney, it had a lot of little things that end up in a payoff. It was character compared to a lot of other sitcoms. But there was that great response to Abe. But when his show didn't work, he didn't come back. For me, a couple of years later, they got the idea of doing a Wojo spinoff. They had the idea that Wojo, because they had this thing that they'd done the story, I think twice, where Wojo falls for a hooker. And I think there's somewhere in there of Danny's experience with life in Vegas and whatever. Those days, it was seen much more as a victim of crime. It's cute that Wojo keeps busting this house of ill repute because he has a crush on the gal. But the show that they write about where he asks her out and she says, sure, I'll go out with you. Same price as everybody. And then you guys may know this story. It might have been in Otto's book. The show is that Wojo finally, he and Barney are the last to leave. And he's talking about, Wojo's kind of asking Barney, who I always thought of more as a big brother relationship than a father-son relationship. I know that a lot of other people saw it more father-son. But finally he says, Barney, could you lend me $50? I'll pay Dave. And the network was saying, you can't say that. They'd fought about the whole storyline, but they said at the end, but no, you can't say that. And he says, what do you mean I can't say that? People will think that he's going to spend it on her. He says, that's exactly what they're going to think. That's the whole point. The whole show leads payoff. We can't. So we're shooting the show like after the audience has gone home kind of thing. We might have often by then gotten rid of the studio audience, but we're still shooting. And Danny's up in the office talking about them. And Noam Pitlick, who's directing, and he calls up. He says, we're there now. So what do we do? He shoot it the way I wrote it. He just called their bluff. So those kind of dynamics within the network and what Barney Miller was and what we could deal with. So we get to that last year and the season is going on and there's no Indian script and there's no talk about the Indian script. And I had a story that I felt really, having been there since really the beginning of that particular iteration of Barney Miller, which was the one that lasted, that I felt like I see a way where we could do something. I'd spent a lot of time up on the Mohawk Reservation and I was with a lot of activists. I felt there and actors who could play the parts that would get past a lot of these ideas people have. But Danny told us, he says, okay, this is how we're going to end the show. The last 3 shows are going to be about it becoming a historical place and so on and so forth. And I said, I still got this deal, but what if we thought of it as the last 4 shows and we could establish something in the show, story I have in mind about, put in context about that historical, there's an older, richer context around the whole thing. And it's woven in. There was one part of a Mohawk woman who worked in the police station downstairs. A lot of Mohawk people worked down in New York. And then there were the other guys who worked high steel from Six Nations. The ones who tended to be the foremen were the longhouse people, the still traditional Mohawk people, because they didn't drink. And they tended to have those jobs because they held it together. And the more progressive, or the ones who turned Catholic now for 3-4 generations, there was that kind of stuff on the longhouse people who felt like this tribal council. When they first passed the laws to create tribal councils, the tribal council of the Mohawk and other Six Nations, they got together, they elected their leaders, and the thing they did was disband the tribal council and go back to their traditional way of leadership and stuff, which, by the way, was the kind of influencer of Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson and others. There is a way to have a way to people to govern themselves without having a king. There was no real model of that anywhere in European. Whole mindset was you got to have somebody at the top. And so I thought it was a wonderful way to, and I had another character that I wanted Charlie Hill to play. Charlie was a dear friend of mine, a wonderful stand-up comedian, but also had great acting skills. He was a young guy who had never been tested in battle. This was based on me, my friend Russell Means' brother, Bill Mean. And Russell was a big strapping guy and a great spokesman. But during Vietnam, he was a Arthur Murray dance. He was pretending to be Italian and teaching Arthur Murray dance. He was still a fighter, where there was a lot of stuff between the people who had the jobs, who were Christianized. And Bill Means had been in Vietnam, and he'd walked the point. And he was very soft-spoken, total different personality. So if Charlie plays this guy, he wants to do something to earn his stripes. So he comes and takes some things from a museum, and he climbs up in a building because he thinks, I'm Indian, I can do this. Once he gets up there, he's totally paralyzed. And this other Indian guy who's there knows, because I remember when I was on the Mohawk Reservation saying, the biggest thing we have to get people to know is, no, you're not, because you're Indian. The people who get all casual or ego or like that, they tend to not live very long. So I had these different things that I felt there was a way to have the story come in with the arrest. I pitched that. I made the point that we have to do an Indian story. And the writers, they just did not want to hear my story. And I didn't have a good enough way of understanding why they might not want to hear me. So they wanted a story about the young guys that's trying to get the old guys to get with it with time, trying to get them to come in. He said, that is not what's going on in Indian country. The young people are looking for the elders who have kept, either secretly or outwardly, have kept that connection. And so we kept butting heads. And then finally, Danny stepped in and wrote it the way he did. So the anthropologist and the Indian guy are. The episode that we did before that was when a whole bunch of traditional Hasidic, I guess, Jews take over the squad room. And there's smoke and everything. And somehow that was okay. But when I'm pitching this thing and finally saying, will you cast? We ended up casting Dennis Banks' his brother, Mark Banks, his older brother. But I said, will you at least read these guys that I know? Okay. He says, well, okay, but if I cast one of them, I don't want these guys coming in and taking over the set. I said, Danny, I just didn't have a way to understand to have a sense of humor about it. What are you talking about? So I've always felt a certain sort of sadness that we never got those levels in that last. Thank you for letting me pick my bones on that. But I think the insight for me is because I found I would be, whether it was ceremonies or like powwows and stuff where they would always bring the flag in. And I connected with a lot of Vietnam. And I found people that had a complete understanding of, I started to get to this point before, and I didn't quite make it, that they had an understanding of the history of things, and they also had their experience in Vietnam. But they didn't take that into something of being crazed. They could hold it all with a sense of a larger sense of values or principles or understandings. Teachings, as Floyd used to say, when you have good teachings, you don't need leaders. Sometimes to help when there were splits amongst the Indian movement. Because all movements that have charismatic leaders have all religions, it happens. When you have good teachings, you don't need leaders. I've always felt a little sad that we didn't get more of that into that story and that way of ending Barney Miller, and that certainly way of wrapping up my life experience through that time. That gave me, so that like afterward, in fairly quick succession, I did a movie. I learned then, and I didn't really understand the timing of things on a film set. When do you need to get ready? When is your time to pitch? With Barney Miller, there were a lot of times I know when the time was, I'd be the one to, I don't think we really quite have this scene. I think there's a layer on something that we'd work on it. And in time, that got to be, okay, I got better at doing that but there was a recognition of there's something, the other people who had way more acting experience and of different kinds of theater, like Cal and Ron Glass had done Shakespeare and stuff. And so there's a way you do sitcom. And I was looking for something deeper. Not that I was a beginner, so I didn't really, it's not like I really knew so much as just how to do that. But if I made it, there's one contribution that I had, because everybody made their contributions to that. I think it was that part of just needing to examine a little more deeply. And I finished with one story back to Fish about how that kind of worked for all of us. Okay. We did a show where they hired a really tall actor because it required it. And he has to get out of the cell and go to the John, and he's in there a long time. And somebody goes in to get him, might have been Ron Carey, somebody, and they come out and they say he's dead. And what happened? Well, he unscrewed the light bulb and stuck his finger in the socket and put in the toilet and shot himself. And Abe had the line, I didn't realize he was that tall. So Hal's saying, how do we play this? We've never played that someone actually dies here. How are we being with it? So that's the question. And people are looking, and Abe goes, I know. We should play it with a loose hat, because he had the fedora, and the guy could pull it down over. Where were you on the night of flip it up? Say, gal, what do you say? You and I, the hat, a loose hat. We should play it with a loose hat. I thought it was just a perfect description of how to play it. And I remember Danny and Al looking at each other. What in the fuck is he talking about? But the thing was that we took that time to really explore it and raise the question. And I think that's what a lot of people who have really enjoyed the show was that kind of work went in from the writing standpoint, and that kind of respect for the material and the audience. It wasn't like, those people out there between New York and LA, they don't, the way a lot of TV was considered. I feel like those are the levels that if you care that much about the show and stuff, that you've got your own sort of take on them or understandings or whatever. That's where it all still resides in my heart.
With those other Native American stories that were on the show, were those directly your influence?
There was only one other. There were only two that dealt with Native American. No, it wasn't like I went to them and we should do something, or they came to me. But I think that fact that I had gotten us involved, I had, because I came to see, now maybe this is something I can do with the fact that I'm in a show. So whether it's TV Guide or Us Magazine or whatever, I learned that even still, if I tried to make some issue, I tried to do that, they would always frame it more like the big, wonderful actor helping out the poor, downtrodden Indians. It was not at all, which led to me for the 1980, when horrible video was just showing up, to start teaming up with documentary filmmakers I'd come to know who were all shooting 16 millimeter film, and just going to the places that I was going anyway and doing the things I was doing anyway, but having a way to record it. And I had an idea of a show to go on opposite Johnny Carson. They had this spot that they couldn't get anybody to watch anything. And they would use up their second showing of Spencer for Hire or some other hit show they had. And they still wouldn't get an audience. And then the advertiser would say, well, you got to give us back. We didn't get the audience we paid. And I was pitching this idea of a docu-musical, the Saturday Night Live generation version of Charles Kuralt's On the Road Sunday morning show, where it was about music and stuff. And it would be anchored in this Native American world that was out there. But what happened was Nightline, the hostage crisis took place in 1980, and Nightline was born. So those executives who would come over and watch us tape at night, as we were their grown-up show, they had the #1 show, but we kept getting the Peabody numerous times. And I had, when I say pitched it, I didn't really know how to pitch like people pitch things. But I would talk to them about, this is what I think would work. Something that was related to what's going on in the world, not like who's got a movie out now, but at the same time, having humor and music at the core of it. And so when Nightline kind of ate up that space, we're trying to figure out how to use the tapes, maybe because it had been part of my deal. They'd pay me some money that would be for this docu-musical. But when they saw some of the stuff from up on the Mohawk Reservation when this confrontation was going on with the Longhouse people, and it was too radical for them, and then we stopped doing the show. And I put all that on the back burner in a way because of getting married and all that family stuff. And now I'm in a place of getting them digitized, because there's a lot of stuff in that 1980, a lot of things specifically for Indian. There are a lot of places in the Indian community colleges and India studies departments and stuff like that where they have media. They have acting and directing. filmmaking, camera way. They have people learning to do this, and you're starting to see stuff like that show up, streaming and stuff like that. So over the years, there's been a lot of that, but I think there's also a lot in there for just how do we look at how we share with the rest of life on the planet and with each other in some kind of way that has a spiritual nature to it and has a high thinking nature to it and isn't about this against that. I'm trying to find, I don't have money to just get it digitized and stuff. And to challenge it's on an old platform. We have better cameras in our phones now. But anyway, that's one of the things that I'm looking to do because I do feel like we are, as a species, in need of something that's less divisive. And I like the definition of dialogue, a conversation with a center instead of sides.
I was really surprised. I was watching a documentary about Gopalo, the Aboriginal actor.
Yes.
And I was very surprised to see you show up in the background that was more focused on the native people that he was interacting with here in the States.
Yeah.
But I think it was at your place.
Yes. So what happened there was in the process of all of that, and there was a certain time, there was Dennis Banks and Buffy St. Marie put their heads together at a time when there were several bills being put into Congress. I think this was 77, maybe. They were called Let's Finally Be Good to the Indians Act or something, but they were really about undermining the reservation system. Instead of making it less confining for Indian people, they were looking to just undermine the whole thing. And so they came up with this idea of walking across the country, starting with a ceremony at Alcatraz, which is where a lot of the first native prisoners were taken from Hopi and Lakota and stuff. So they'd say, yeah, they're on an island out in the ocean to break that thing. And they filled a pipe and carried the pipe across the country and stuff. And I was there at that. And then I was on the walk a lot. And then I was going around from the cities in those days, the major cities like Detroit or Cleveland or whatever. They had their own talk show after the morning talk shows. There wasn't a view. The networks hadn't realized, there's an audience here. So they didn't have their own. And so I was able to get on any of those because they were still showing Barney Miller. And then when the walk reached Washington, I was there. And this guy, Jean-Pierre Dutilleur, had a French guy, actually Belgium. And he had made this film about somebody he had met some years earlier on a doc for National Geographic called Raoni. He had met and about what was going on in the Amazon. He got Marlon Brando to narrate it, and it was nominated for Academy Award. And he was in Washington, and I was there, and I got brought into the press conferences and invited to have lunch with Ali. And because I was a part of that. And Jean-Pierre, this gal, Elena Kastianidis, she was in a couple of movies with Jack Nicholson. She was a Greek, hardcore, wonderful gal. And she was having these roller skating events over in the valley that they could keep the paparazzi out and stuff. So if you were on the invite list, you could get in a roller skate. I knew her. She's the one I wanted Danny to cast for Wojo's girlfriend. And they just had their own ideas of what Wojo's girlfriend would be like. What is their life going to be? I said, what if their life is about nothing? He hooks up with a former hooker. Can he continue being a cop? Can their lives change? So maybe their lives are all about the postman who's retired and now his life has changed. They didn't really have an idea. So I finally told Danny, I said, I don't want to do this. I see what happened with Fish. I said, he finally said, okay. He gave me a private letter that said that if it did get picked up, he wouldn't make me do it. And I think that he probably thought, I'll get Max if it gets picked up. But I didn't want to leave the show. We had a good thing going. Why would I want to leave it? Plus, now I only got a couple more years on my contract or whatever. All of those are the layers. I think each actor had their own issues. We never got together. I said, it's all going together. I kind of wish maybe I'd proposed that. Probably would have been up to me. I inherited second billing because Abe left and
I was going to say, you mentioning the fact of the spinoff, like you were second billed in the show. Like by the time that came around, and we'll be honest with you, because you can listen to the episode where we talk about it. Wojo's Girl is a rough episode to watch. The fact that they were thinking about a spinoff is crazy because your chemistry with Hal Linden on the show really is like the pillar of the show is the two of you together.
A lot of people feel that way. There are those that just love Ron Glass, and that I think it's kind of spread out in a way. But I think it became that out of blue. That's where they could put the stuff. And it would have been nice to get into something where Joe really get with somebody who's really going to give it back to him about what he thinks about stuff. But she still sees something in him. And I think that she would have brought a whole bunch of other actors to that show because she, amongst the people, if you just think of Jack Nicholson and the other actors in the world he was in and stuff. And she was much cherished in that group because I asked her, I said, would you be into doing this? She didn't know how to talk to them in a way, say, listen, you guys. And I was more about like, what's the other side of this life I'm living? That once in a while there's a chance to act in something, but there's also this whole other side of this visibility I have, and how can I make it useful beyond the kind of typical TV guide story. I was more about that and just exploring that in life. Like with David, when there was an American guy, you talk about David Copperfield, there was an American guy, Bill Linebeck. He'd gone to film school in London, and then he was down in Australia, and he had connected up with David. And David wanted to tell a story about a guy who had, through the Aboriginals, still talked about, an American guy who just before the turn of the century had come down there to start a cattle operation. Because by then, the whole cattle thing, people would raise money in the stock market, and mainly in Boston, to start a cattle operation so they could bring beef protein into the city to feed all the factory workers. That was, in the time of Go West, young man, the big population growth was not in the West. But by then, it had just become so set up how it worked that this guy went to Australia to try to set up a cattle operation in the Northern Territory. And he never succeeded. But he did end up marrying an Aboriginal woman and being the first sheriff of Darwin. And the Aboriginals still talk about him. His children, his offspring, aren't running the stock market of Australia. And he wanted to do this story. And so they raised some money for a film called Walkabout to Hollywood, so they could come to Hollywood and try to pitch this. And they signed Buffy to play a part of an Indian woman who goes with him to Australia because she's killed the killers of her husband. And now she needs to get away. And David wanted to meet Indian people. I said, well, then you got to go talk to Max Gail. And I knew through my friend Jean-Pierre, who'd made the film about Rowney. That's how I knew Bill, this group of guys that had made films and stuff like that. And so that's how I got to know David. And we spent quite a bit of time together. And that's how we happened to be out at my house. We were out there a lot. But on that day, we rolled my upright piano out on the deck, plates and stuff. Somebody just sent me, I haven't watched the whole film, but somebody just the other day sent me a link to that. And I have 16 millimeter film of that time. It's pretty moldy. I don't know if it's any good, but also when I was down there in Australia, which in the end, we weren't able to get the movie made. There was a phone strike. There were a whole bunch of things that happened, and we just had to not make it. But I was with David up there and then out on one of their ranches, their stations, where they had cowboy, Aboriginal cowhand like that. And there's been an effort recently to try to pull together a memorial for him. That was a great experience. He was so bright. And being with them, and because I was with one of the producers of the film, and we were the only two white people, and David hadn't gone through the stuff he was supposed to go through for white people to get into Ramagini there in the village and that Northern Territories area and land. And so eventually some wardens showed up and a truck and gathered us up. And at that point, we were at a village meeting. It was all very interesting, but most of the time, that 10 days or so, I was with David and his mother and sister and his friends, his cousin, and just went on walkabout. We're sitting around the fire, getting ready to make a meal. And one of them looks over. They do like a lot of Indian people. They point with their lip and their chin. They get directions. Where such and such, I go, people think they haven't answered. But if they're saying, you go down there about 2 miles and there's a left, can you take a left? Then something fall with their butt. He says, now look over and here's this kangaroo sitting watching it. So just as we're there, one of them picks up his spear with a spear thrower, a thing on it gives you like another joint. And they'd already demonstrated from early how accurate they could be. He nails this kangaroo and they go over, and in about the same timing as pizza's here, they drag it over and slit it open and start throwing the organs into the coals and slicing the skin off. And it's just like about as quickly as you would get a pizza order and the bread rolls or the cheese sticks or whatever. It was a really interesting time to see that and be with that. And David was having to make his own. He'd gone off. Now he was back. And he flaunted the rules. He didn't get us in there the right way. And so they were having this meeting. But on the other hand, they were starting to get offers, negotiation, people coming at them to negotiate deals around what they would do in order so that they could do uranium mining in Arnhem Land. And they were looking for what had been the Native American experience. And they knew that I knew about. I had stuff I could share with them of what had happened in South Dakota and in Arizona. And we're having that conversation, and then they're talking, and every once in a while, an English word would appear because they didn't have an Aboriginal for. So it all of a sudden it'd be four-wheeler or something, and you're talking, and then every once in a while, this one guy would say in a beautiful, almost like an Oxford rather than an Australian accent, but to say to something, David, yes, you haven't been around here during that time. Or the thinking level, that energy didn't shift. It just came out in this other language that I could understand. Yeah, he ended up, though, really playing a significant role in getting Aboriginal people more understanding and recognition of the profoundness of that culture.
Yeah, I know Ralph DeHare he and his wife made a documentary about David. I think it was like 3 years ago. And I've been looking forward to seeing that because I know he worked with him quite a bit in Australia and like 10 Canoes and some of those other films. Yeah.
I haven't seen that. I heard about that.
I think it's interesting, though, because, and this was something I specifically wanted to ask you because she just recently passed away, but Linda Lavin, the chemistry between the two of y'all on the show is, if they were going to spin off a show, why wouldn't it just be the two of you?
I like that.
She gave it to you just as well as you gave it to her.
Yeah.
In some of the episodes of our show, I bemoan the fact that there were no women in the precinct because every other base is effectively covered in terms of what you're expecting, especially of the time.
I read a great obituary on Linda, but it talked about the last play that she did. And it described her tone where she could be supportive and judgmental at the same time. I don't have the words, but they were a wonderful, mix of things that you usually wouldn't think would be in one person because they're so paradoxical. And she had that. And I really liked Linda and the other producers who were there mainly to just help Danny through writing late at night. You know what I mean? Danny always made all the decisions. And they had been after him to make her an offer, bring her on. Go, what are you waiting for? And then she got cast and Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And they grumbled about it and went away. But that's what happened. I think she would have been happy to come on and do the show.
I can imagine what that would have been like with Linda Lavin and Steve Landisberg and Ron Carey and yourself and Hal Linden and Ron Glass. You mentioned yourself about being a very forward-thinking person. Imagine in the 80s that kind of show with the diverse cast that Barney Miller had, including a female lead. That's something else, right?
Yeah.
Especially at the time.
Barbara Berry could have brought that kind of stuff to it, but they didn't run. And finally, Barbara, after saw the handwriting on the wall, we're not going to shoot. She said, look, Danny, I just can't keep coming down every 3 or 4 weeks to bring Barney his lunch.
Right.
You're not going to create something for me, then, let me out. And I'm not sure what that was. Some of it was just Danny and his way of, he did My World and Welcome to It. No, that was the Thurber thing. He did That Girl, Marlo Thomas. So it wasn't like he couldn't write he was a showrunner on that. But at the same time, that was all another era of looking at gender relationships.
That's been the one thing when we've done the show that I'm sure our audience got sick and tired of me complaining about early on was, where is Barbara Berry? Stop billing her in the show if she's not going to be in the damn show. Because I don't know, because her like with yourself and Hal and everybody else on the show, like it was so well written and the chemistry is so good that every time you don't see that person but they're billed, it's like, I want to see that. Like, I would like for them to be there because the chemistry is so great.
Barbara's wonderful. I remember one time she was talking about something and people asked her, how do you act Shakespeare? She said, it's silly. You learn how to act and then you can do Shakespeare. Because for me, it was all new. I'd been around Lisa Strasberg and that energy and all, but it was still a world of great opportunity. Some of these people like Barbara and other people who'd done lots of Broadway and lots of theater and brought chops to it. Dick Gregory.
Why do you feel like Barney and Wojo had a big brother, little brother relationship versus a paternal relationship? Because I think that's where Mike and I thought it was. But I'm very curious, per you, obviously having been on the show and having been the character, why is your perception the way that it is big brother, little brother, as opposed to father, son to it,
yeah,
I think.
I think that's way, maybe even Hal might say that. But for one thing, we're just not that far apart in age.
There is that.
That's fair.
Okay.
That
11 years older than I am or something, maybe 11 or 12. But, so that's not a father-son relationship. And I think just in terms of that, the physicality on a couple occasions, we went for a run together around. There was a sort of a lake up above in Hollywood, just a big water resource, but we let track around it that we went running a few times. I was definitely like competitive with him. I was amazed at how close he kept up to me. And I was not going to let him beat me kind of thing. But I just didn't feel like my dad was 32 when I was born. So my dad was not a real young dad, but a 10-year difference. That's the main reason, is just that. I think that in some ways, although it was never really developed, explored, there's some of it came up in one of the Lindas with a hotel thing where I said something to her about my dad. Yeah, my dad said, because we worked on Easter, my dad said, if the Lord can get up and move a rock, you can work. Never really quite got into, even for myself as an actor, or with what his relationship with his dad was. But I felt like with Wojo, he just, like it's said often about Indian people and Polish people, they think more with their heart than their head. And I think that he came from that place. And so he did recognize that thing in Barney that he had a lot of respect for, that maybe was part of it. So there was something about what his older brother was into that held something older.
You got to work with Dan Curtis. I was curious how that experience was with the First of the Black Widow.
Oh, yeah, I did, actually. The thing I remember about that in particular was that I worked with Patty Dew, who I'd seen like growing up as a child, and Tony Franciosa. I did a few other experiences when I auditioned for the Actors Studio, and I did a scene from Cuckoo's Nest, and I got a call from, I'll come back to Black Widow, but I got a call from Martin Landau. Hello, Max. This is Martin Landau. He said, yes, we were very impressed with your audition. Because when I did it, I went out to the parking lot after, and a bunch of people came after. Lee wants to know, who are you? What have you done? And I said, pretty much that. I did that play. I've got a couple of little speaking parts. And I heard from other people that they had quite a conversation, because Lee was reluctant to bring me in as a member. They made me an observer, which is kind of a status that let you come to the studio, but you're not quite yet a member. He wants to see you get up and do some sessions. But people told me, he kept saying, I don't know, an Indian who cries. And when I heard that, I thought that doesn't make any sense. And when I started to spend time with Indian people, I found that it's not like somebody cries and everybody's, oh, don't cry, here's a hanky. It's just, people are crying because there's something, that's an emotion, but it's not, okay, they're not crying for effect. But so he said, we thought maybe, he said the characters seemed to be like very powerful, but not in touch with it. I said, that's pretty much him. He's a big guy who still thinks he's little. And he said, so we thought maybe you'd come back and audition and maybe do something, say, from Streetcar Named Desire. And this Martin Landau voice, going, and I was like, that would be Stanley Kowalski or Mitch. There was no way I was going to go and do a scene at the Actors Studio from Streetcar Named Desire. I did not have any kind of feeling like, yeah, I could do that. All right. I just, and what happened when the show was picked up is just life became more interesting with these other things. And certainly it helped me to do as I say, John Belushi. You get a job, you're making money, you're getting famous. John was a much more bigger talent, personality out there, way more than I, way more committed to what it was that whole idea that you've got enough money to buy drugs for your friends. And who's going to tell you that you got your head up your ass if you're doing too many of them, and are you going to listen to them and stuff? And so by connecting in with something that not only opened up a lot of ways to think about things that I was looking for, but also just was way more important than a little TV show or something, and a chance to be connected in a way, because coming into those times were when the cops were all the pigs, if you were on that side of things, which I was not that one-sided about. But for Indian people that I was dealing with, they were in conflict with the law as it was written dealing with Indian people. It wasn't like they just wanted to knock off gas stations or something.
For 8 years, we saw Wojciehowicz, but for one episode, as far as I know, and I don't think this happened again, but for one episode, we saw Max Gail, and that was the goodbye to Jack Sue. I found that very brave that you didn't come out as Wojciehowicz, you didn't have the hairpiece. You were you. What was that like to send off a friend like that and a coworker like that?
It was an interesting time. The idea was that we were all ourselves talking about Jack, but they had written something for everybody. And then I decided, if I'm being me, I don't want to do that. And so I think I was like the third person, maybe the fourth. Anyway, Hal said something, whatever the order was. People said their thing. And I just said, that's nice. I just want to talk about how I feel about Jack. And I said what I had to say. And then Hal said, I want to do that too. And then we said, okay, then let's do that. And all of that scripted stuff was jettisoned. So it was good to, Jack was the one, as I became more and more involved with sort of the Indian movement and that kind of stuff. Jack was the one who most understood what I was finding out about life in America. Of course, he had his own experience being in camps. And so he got that. And then there was this other thing that it probably might be one of your questions, but that I directed, and Hal directed a couple of shows. And the way that came about was that pretty much from the get-go, we'd be doing the show and Danny would come down. There'd be a director. According to the union rules, you couldn't direct, write, and produce. You could do 2 of those, but you couldn't do all 3. So Danny couldn't produce and write and also direct. Okay, so you had to hire a director. The pilot and stuff we did, and then the first episodes, they'd have directors, and as the show hit, we'd have directors that would say, oh, I'm going to do a Barney Miller, and I want to make it really funny. And most other shows, the way they worked was they table read and put the show on its feet and then run through it for the writers at the end of the day, and the stuff they'd like, they'd keep in, and you'd come in the next day, and there'd be rewrites, and then you'd do that, and that's how the show came together. But more and more, Barney Miller was coming where they didn't really have the end of it written. There had been original script that got the idea. Maybe they hired that writer, but now they were starting to make it more like Barney Miller, and sometimes that would change the end. And so we got used to really looking for where's the reality scene. Not to get all, where's the real, but we're looking for that. And then as the show would get that into the final rewrites, which sometimes we would catch up, we're shooting, and we've caught up, and now we get the last few pages down, and we sit down, we read them, we put it on its feet, find out where we're going and how that works. And which was Ned Beatty signed on, and he didn't have to, we get that 2 days of rehearsal. He still hadn't seen his character's script. He said, I'm going, I can't do this. But we would have directors that would really, if something was funny, then they'd kind of want to just keep drilling that. And that kind of was not how we were finding the show. And then what would happen is we'd get to shooting. And by then, Danny had learned, he hated the whole idea of being up in the booth where the directors would be on blocking day. So they're looking at all the monitors up in the booth, and the actors are going, and then over the sound, you hear, Max, could you take a step to your right here, right now? You're blocking this, whatever. And I would be the one that would be, you know, at this moment right here, where you're trying to nail it down. Actually, I think there's something else that happens at me. And then Danny would, okay, wait a minute. And he'd come, it would be a while, and then you'd hear his footsteps on the edge of the sound stage, and he'd come up, and we'd work it out, and then he'd go back up. And the next thing I knew, they brought down what we called a quad, 4 monitors that were set up, and the director could see those, and we could see them. So made a circle of those 4, the camera that was behind the camera, but we could look over and see what that issue was, where I see where I'm getting into that shot or whatever. And as we knew that when it came to shooting, Danny was going to come down, and after a little bit, he'd say to the director or Joe or whoever, did you mind if I just, and he'd say something to Hal, or before long, Danny's directing. And some of the directors would keep trying to come up with directions for us to keep, but it's so clear he's just on another level, and we are all in a relationship. So Hal and I went to him and said, look, Danny, why don't you let us all together do that part that you don't like? Figuring out, oh, somebody hasn't been out of the room long enough to have gone downstairs and come back? Or how do you figure it out so that just coming over and to hearing this much of the sound, and then as he's walking out, he said, whatever, that flow, that you find it so that then you can play it like it's just happening. Danny didn't, he wasn't interested in that part of it at all. And we'll do that. And then you could come down. So we did that, and Hal directed one, and Danny came down and took over, and then it was my turn. And we were talking about Jack. Jack at that point had found out that he had colon cancer. He was supposed to go in the hospital. But I learned later that he said, I want to be there put it off for a week. I don't want to suddenly be out of the show. And Max says that. He didn't tell me that. Others told me that after. But what happened with other thing was that Danny came down, and we were into it. And then I saw him standing there on the edge of the set when I got out of the director's chair in front of the quad. When I stepped back, and I said, here, come, okay, we've been waiting for you. And he says, good night, everybody. And he walked off. And I don't know who was more panicked, me or the rest of the crew, because I was the hippie guy of the crew. What the fuck are we going to do? So it was a vote of confidence. But then finally settled on having known him. But by then, he'd been an observer and the pilot. He really understood, how we worked, how it worked. And so that was difficult. I think, what was Wojo's Girl, one of the ones I directed? Or no, Wojo's Problem.
Right.
My problem with that was they said he's confusing impotence with sterility. He's sterile. He thinks it means he's impotent. I said, he knows whether he's impotent or not. I made the adjustment. It's just that there is something about sterility, because that was when some of the younger writers were taking over more. And the younger writers didn't get that complexity where if you have a character that on a conscious level, he's going this way, and on an unconscious level, he's going that way. He thinks this woman with her shopping basket and her homeless, she shouldn't be doing that. But on another level, he's feeling her humanity and the wrongness of it. So there's that battle going on. What's the right thing to do? And they tended to write more on the nose.
I had a question that's a little away from Barney Miller, but at the same time not, which was, speaking of being Max Gail, as a person that was acting during the late 70s, early 80s on a network TV show, was it just expected that you were to do other things like Battle of the Network Stars, $20,000 or $10,000 Pyramid? Because I loved your appearances on those, and I was just curious how that actually came in.
They were offered to you. I mean, if Battle of the Network Stars, do you want, some ridiculous amount of money to do this thing? You know, and I was involved in these other things. So I say, these guys are trying to raise money to do such and such. Well, I'll do Battle of the Network Stars, and then I can put that money there. $10,000 Pyramid or what? Well, they fly you to New York first class. They put you up in a hotel. You do this show.
Why say no?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's there to say no to? There were shows I didn't want to do that I would get offered, like Love Boat.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought kind of cheesy. Maybe I just had too much attitude. I ended up doing a Murder, She Wrote sometime later. That was a little different because Angela Lansbury, such an incredible kind of talent.
We do a Columbo show away from Barney Miller, so we're Levinson and Link disciples over here.
I remember going up in the office to talk to Danny briefly about something, and Peter Falk was there. Michael Landon was another one. Danny did this show that was like Little House on the Prairie, but it was a Jewish family, because he knew that there were a lot of Jewish homesteaders, and Landon was Jewish. There were all those interesting connections, but Peter Falk and that group that did those films with Cassavetes, and that way of improving, and was so much stuff to get in. I'll sometimes look at the possibilities that were there to find maybe more of that with Wojo, but I think at the time, it was more about just finding where the relationships we had with each other translated into how the characters felt about each other.
When I was watching Barney Miller the first time around, I was watching with my folks. That was their show, and I was part of it. The show that was for me, though, was the one that you did afterwards with Whiz Kids. Can you tell me a little bit about Whiz Kids?
So I'd done this movie, DC Cat. Okay. And when I talked with Joel Schumacher about it, I said, I think this could be the first of a series of movies. Like it was instead of sort of broad and slapstick and car washy, because that's what Joel had done before. He'd done car wash, but Jamaica, and he agreed with it all. I had signed on for it. And one of the things I learned in doing it was I just didn't understand when to get yourself ready and that sort of thing. So then I got this offer to come in and meet with Phil DeGuerre about WizKids, and they had done the pilot, and then it worked. That 20-something reporter that they go to see because he's got a little bit bigger computer should be an older guy, because then we get something in the show to appeal to the older. So I was on the list of people like Nick Nolte and people who weren't going to do it, but the network had a list. But at the top of the list is somebody who might. And I thought, this is so E.T. 80s. But what if Ken Kesey decided he wanted to head back down and get involved or something like that? And so you'd have sort of 60s and 80s. And my hair was long. I'd stick it up under my Wojo hairpiece. Now, and at the time, though, I was recording some songs because I'd gotten married, and my wife got together with my best man, Merle Saunders, who was a wonderful San Francisco keyboard player. With everybody from Miles to Jerry Garcia. We were friends. I met him when he was playing with Bucky. And Phil was a kind of a hopeless deadhead. And he had also gotten the job of producing the next iteration of Twilight Zone. And he wanted to get the Dead to do the music for the Twilight Zone. But he couldn't get through to them because they had a barrier up for anybody that was that head over heels. You can come to our concerts and tape them and sell the tapes and all of that. But as far as like coming backstage, and we got our own thing going. So he said yes to all of my ideas. I wish I had thought, instead of Ken Kesey, which I had a connection, it just occurred to me just the other day. if I'd said, what if he's a deadhead? Kids could have gotten all those same values, the same sensibility, and it would have opened up lots of things. But anyway, it ended up being something where the guy that was the line producer, this is now at Universal. Barney Miller was an outlier. We shot at an outlying studio. It's Universal. They got a whole bunch of stuff going on there. There are a whole bunch of the trade guys, the camera and all, the craft services, all of that are people, they're part of Universal. If they can get on a show, then they know they're going to be working for a while. But the line producer, he knows that. So he would fire somebody every week to keep everybody like on their toes. For the kids, it was like, did you hear they fired Joe? So I went and talked to the guy and he was kind of like, who the fuck do you think you are? He wasn't that direct about it because I was an actor and I had a deal to direct to them. So there were those levels going on, and I had cast A. Martinez, who I knew because he had done some Barney Millers. I didn't know that A had gone to UCLA and stuff. He was so into his hood character that he played, who was kind of like Danny as a kid. It was that character in the leather jacket. That was like Danny, the Jewish son of a single mother who wore his leather jacket and went in the Marines. But I'm trying to get with Phil and get a deeper level what they were bringing up. And the show, every week for a certain number of shows, that were dealing with somebody that was a division of NASCOR, Nasty Corporate. It was a record company or something. NASCOR was behind it in this kind of cartoonish way. And then around that time, when Reagan and stuff and they came down from higher above, no, we should have them get involved in some kind of international kind of spy agent. And they wanted to do it in a way that my character wouldn't know anything about that. And I said, well, Phil, these kids can't come to work without a social worker and a school teacher and their parents on this. Does it make sense that these kids are working for this international spy agency and no adults know about it? Of course, a few years later, there was some films of Spy Kids movies where it was pretty much that.
Right.
They were hit movies. But for me, it was just a lot of trying to make it be about that I put a lot of my attention into, so much so. He and I never worked out a way of, well, what is it about? He's my brother-in-law. We don't get along. But what is it we don't get along about? And Phil had no idea. He just thought that would be funny if they didn't. And we never found it. I never really found that time with A. I've known him so much better now, and I only needed to open up the conversation, but I got fixated on the other so much that I didn't realize that there were things that in retrospect, when we finally found out my wife was sick, I realized there were signs about this. There were some I won't go into it now, but there were things that made me think, boy, I don't want to get so wrapped up in a show again that I missed something really major going on in my family. But Matthew Laboratory, brilliant young man, ambidextrous, autistic, and his adoptive mother talked about how she dealt with him at a point where she would just hold him down. I guess he does a lot of voiceovers. I saw his brother recently. He hasn't been doing much acting, but doing voice work. Just so smart and skilled. He could throw a football with either hand or a bass far. He just totally ambidextrous. But that was it with Phil. We went up to a Grateful Dead concert because, of course, I always tell it. It ended up that Merle, that connection, and they do and Merle's son, Tony, who worked on that, Tony played bass on the stuff we recorded, and he still gets royalties for the music of the Twilight Zone because it still shows. It was a cautionary experience of getting wrapped up in the wrong way and not understanding where to put. If I understood some other things differently, I might have been able to express what was going on or differently or think about, let's make him. I didn't understand the Dead. I had met Jerry. I kind of liked their music, but I didn't really get what it was about them and how they approached and how they evolved, what all that was. That was so unique. So thank you for your patience and let me run on like that.
Max, this was such a pleasure. I really cannot thank you enough for your time. You're so generous.
I think we spent the same amount of time or invested it. I remember one of those group therapy groups at one point when I had first come out here. Anyway, and some guy's talking about this time with his wife, and it seems pretty much true to clear to everybody else that was a nut. And he said, but I've invested so much time. And someone said, no, you spent it. But we passed an equal amount of time here together. And I did most of the talking.
It was so great.
Yeah, likewise.
Well, I didn't think it was going to happen, Chris, but we finally bagged ourselves a celeb.
I know, right? We finally have a Max Gail for our show. Whew. The so Max nice. Gail, not the yes. Singular Max Gail. Who I think would have kept talking to us if we didn't have to go.
Yeah, no, I I think you're completely right. Yeah, very, very generous with this time, which was fantastic. And kind of wish that this had happened a few seasons ago. We could have done like we do with Otto and checked in with him. Been like, okay, what did we get wrong?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, because you were talking about Whiz Kids right at the end of the interview, I went and looked at what he looks like in Whiz Kids. He looks like Jimmy Buffett.
I can see that. I can see that.
I think I need a pencil thin mustache.
Yeah, with the hair and all that. Yeah.
The Boston Blackie kind.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with the hair. It's the hair and the mustache. It's that like thin ass mustache and the hair. Looks like Jimmy Buffett. I was like, wow, you look Buffett-esque. Oh, are you excited are you excited to plug who's going to be on our final episode of the show? It's not going to just be us. Shocking, nope. I know.
Won't just be us. It'll be two of our fairly regular guest co-hosts. We're going to have both Richard Haddam and Otto Bruno back for the final time to discuss Barney Miller as we go through the finale of the show, Landmark Part 1, 2, and 3.
A 3-part episode of Barney Miller. Wow.
Hopefully the 3-parters are better than the 2-parters.
Yes, because the 2-parters are, for the most part, not good.
No, but I really hope that this sticks the landing. I know some people on the Facebook group that we're both in, the Barney Miller Facebook group, but occasionally somebody will post that last image from the show, the thanks from all the folks at the old one too. And I'm just like, that's going to make me cry. Because even when I see it out of context, I'm just like, all good things, got to come to an end.
Yeah, I'm really excited to end this journey together and to put a kind of cap on Barney Miller, because like I said before, we didn't get the opportunity with Kolchak. It just kind of ended, and Rankin and Bass just kind of ended. So this will be, I don't know. I'm excited. I have a little bit of trepidation. I am quite sad as well, because Barney Miller has made a positive impact on my life. I mean, we joked about this, and I didn't want to tell Max Gail about it because it wasn't his, but I collect sports cards, and I was at a sports card store in Omaha over the holidays, and I bought a Hal Linden 1-of-1 signed card, which I would never have bought if I had not watched Barney Miller. And I think about just the things in my life that I have watched or liked, and the weird avenues of life that they have taken me on, and I am very grateful to you, Mike, because you picked Barney Miller. I did not. You picked Kolchak. I did not. I technically didn't even pick Night Court. I think you were just like, you want to do Night Court? And I was like, sure. I'm very amenable. So I just, I am. If anything, I'm very amenable. Some people may not believe that, but I am. I just wanted to thank you again, Mike, for sharing this journey with me, because, I reached out to you on that Kolchak Facebook post 7, 8, 9 years ago now. And now here we are knocking on the door of closing out our, I guess, first real big boy show that we've ever done. So.
Yeah, well, we really couldn't have gotten here without each other. And then especially all the help that we've gotten from folks like Richard, also from Otto. I mean, Otto's book has just been an invaluable resource. It's just like the Wojciechowicz book when we were doing the Kolchak stuff. It's like, and the same thing doing Columbo. Like the Wojciechowicz, I look at his Columbo file every single time before we record. It's like him, Koenig's book, some of these other ones that we've talked about. So yeah, Otto's been a tremendous help. And then of course, having John Walker writing our opening theme song has been wonderful. And we close almost every episode with the theme song of all theme songs. I think it was season 4's version of the Barney Miller theme. So freaking good.
We stand on the shoulders of giants because we are mere men, and that is the reality. We sit and talk about everybody else's shows and spend time screaming at the top of our lungs how important everybody else's stuff is. And yeah, to your point, we could not have done this without, the listeners as well. So thank you so much for joining us for this journey through Barney Miller. If you're someone like me who'd never seen it before, or someone like Mike who is more familiar with it, or someone like Richard or Otto who's, an immense fan of the show and has nothing but love for it, I think to your point, I don't want to inflate his ego without him being here, but Otto's book has been we have done a lot of work. Otto has done that much times fucking 10. It's like an amount of work that we spent 5 years talking about this show. Otto spent like a decade writing a fucking 1,200 page tome about the book. So if this show has not been enough for you, go read Otto Bruno's book about Barney Miller, which you can find on Bear Manor Media, because it is kind of, as far as I'm concerned, the singular piece of information about the show if you want to know everything, short of going and doing like we did and getting in touch with Max Gail to talk with him. That's the best resource, because Otto spoke to family members of Steve Landisberg and Ron Carey and other people. And I believe he spoke with some of the people who have now since passed away even. So yeah, Otto and, Otto's expertise has been invaluable, because to your point, like every time we do an episode of our show, I always read along in the book where we are, because it's sitting on my shelf right over there. So any opportunity to plug Otto's book, I'm gonna use it. So here you go, Otto. Here's another freebie.
We should still be paying him for all
true.
The help he's given us.
I mean, without Otto, no Max Gail. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, until we come back for our final episode, what are you working on these days?
Audio diversions over at weirdingwaymedia.com. This show and so many other great shows. 80s TV Ladies, which is hosted by Richard Haddam's better half, Susan Lambert Haddam and Sharon Johnson. They got to talk to Bruce Boxleitner from Scarecrow and Mrs. King. We didn't get to talk to Bruce Boxleitner because we don't have a reason to, not because we don't want to. But if that's something you're into, 80s TV Ladies is a great look at TV shows from the 80s. And if you're watching Barney Miller, you might be into TV shows from the 80s. Hey, take a look at ones with women. So yeah, that's where you can go and find something that I think you might be into if you're into this, or our Columbo show, which can also be found over at weirdingwaymedia.com. What about you, Mr. Mike White?
Well, now I'm just thinking, well, gosh, I got to do a Tron episode if they've got Bruce Boxleitner. I mean,
they sure did. They got the inside track, baby.
Oof,
They're friends. They're friends with the Boxleitner, with the box, the double B.
BB. Yeah.
BB.
Yeah, no, I mean, I fucking love Tron. It's such
Who doesn't?
Oh, yeah.
I can't wait for Tron 3 with Jared. Oh, God.
Is that happening still?
Yes, it is. Right? It is. Oh, it is actually happening now with Jared Leto.
Oh, boy. Yeah, he added so much to that sequel to Blade Runner.
Yeah. Oh yeah, or Morbius, or all those other films that he's been in.
Oh, good Lord.
That's what we need. Barney Miller, the reboot with Jared Leto as Barney Miller. Watch as everyone collectively implodes.
Yeah, I can't even imagine him anywhere near the glory of that mustache.
Stuart Townsend tried to play Kolchak. That's all I'm saying. Yeah. I'm saying there's a precedent for kind of weird, what's eccentric dudes playing old school characters that it's just like, nah.
Hard pass.
And we were the biggest defenders of Stuart Townsend on that Kolchak podcast, but even I can't defend it now.
No, I can't either. Yeah, as far as what I'm up to, everything can be found over at weirdingwaymedia.com, except for the one show that we do with Richard Haddam, which is exclusive to our respective Patreons, patreon.com/culturecast and patreon.com/projection booth, which is our Rankin' on Bond podcast, where every month we are talking about a different James Bond film. As we are wrapping this up, this episode, the Bond episode won't come out for a little while, but we're gearing up to talk about Never Say Never Again. And I have a feeling that I'm going to be saying never quite a few times during that episode.
I hope to never have to watch that movie ever again.
Oh boy. Yeah, it's funny because that used to be one of my faves, but that ship has sailed.
Time and distance from things prove out in the end.
Yes. I still have a big crush on Barbara Carrera. So
I still have a big crush on old man Sean Connery.
Oh, well, yeah. Who doesn't?
Yeah, right. Oh.
Well, thanks everybody for listening. Come on back next month and we will wrap up everything and then come back sometime later in 2025. We haven't decided yet, but we're going to start digging into some Night Court, which I've got a video I'm going to have to share with you. Somebody took I can't remember if it's the music from Barney Miller and put the Night Court opening over it or vice versa, if it's the Night Court song over the Barney Miller opening. But yeah, I feel that these are spiritual cousins.
Yeah, and I'm X-Man Night Court. Talk about something I've never seen.
I remember really disliking it the first time around, so I'm hoping that this will be a lot funnier this time.
Me too.
Have you ever wanted to dive deeper into the horror movies you love? Beyond the Blood is a horror podcast for fans who want more than just surface level screams. We do deep dives into the movies that shaped us, digging into director commentaries, behind the scenes stories, deleted scenes, and the special features that most people skip. Each episode is a love letter to the genre. We break down how these films were made, the creative risks that paid off or didn't, and the lasting impact they've had on the genre as a whole. From 70s slashers to modern nightmares, we celebrate the craft, chaos, and characters that keep us coming back. If you're the kind of fan who rewatches movies with the commentary on, or you simply grew up in the video store horror aisle, the Beyond the Blood podcast was made for you. New episodes every single week. Subscribe, and let's dig deep. Welcome to the Beyond the Blood podcast.
Hello and welcome to Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys. My name is Hunter. In this podcast, I'll be joined by a different guest each week to discuss a classic Western movie or TV show. I've been a fan of classic Westerns for as long as I can remember, and in recent years, they've become very nostalgic for me. I love the aesthetic, the tropes, and I love seeing different filmmakers' takes on them. At their best, they're incredibly entertaining, rewatchable, and some of my all-time favorite movies are Westerns. We'll mostly focus on Western movies made in Hollywood, but we'll also be covering spaghetti Westerns, and one thing I'm very excited to get into are Western TV shows. I've got some amazing guests coming on the show, film professors, historians, and podcasters. And Tumbleweeds and TV Cowboys is part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, and many guests on the show will be from other shows on the network. Thanks for listening.